Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Scottish Property Podcast. My name is Stephen Clark and I'm joined with always as my co-host Nick Ponte. How you doing, Nick?
Hello, yes, all good, thanks, mate. All good.
Good. This week we have got Paul Kingham on. So Paul Kingham's got a big goal. He wants to achieve 1,000 homes for 1,000 families in 10 years. And they've had a really good chat with him, didn't we? We spoke quite a lot about how property investment isn't really an investment business. It's actually a business and not just an investment. It's not passive as people would like to think. We talked on your favourite subjects as well, didn't we, Nick?
Property education, yeah. I mean, I want to try and get away from this because I just feel like, okay, I've had some negative thoughts about property education in the past, but as I explained in the podcast, I don't think it's all bad. And I think, the stuff that you guys are doing, like yourself and Paul now, I think that's really valuable, that kind of constant support, mentorship, and, your mastermind groups as well. So yeah, and I've also seen how much money you can make at it as well. So you never know, mate. I might come out with a course myself one day.
You want to come and join on board, mate? No, it was a really good chat with Paul. We did cover a wide range of subjects, didn't we? It was a nice chat.
Well, he's sourced 90 deals as well since he started, and I think it was 2016.
17, but I think he didn't get started till 18. So I mean, it's quite a short period of time to source that amount of deals. So he's been doing really well.
Yeah, he'd sourced a lot on for other investors. I think now he's predominantly going to be focusing on building his own portfolio, which is why I think he's kind of realised that the 1,000 homes was a kind of big ambition kind of goal at the start. He's kind of changed his tactic a little bit because he's kind of realised if he owned 1,000 homes, then you can think, I mean, we're talking about being passive. That's probably as unpassive as it could be. Imagine having 1,000 properties and you're having to like take calls and deal with repairs. And I mean, you pretty much have to have a full squad of people to deal with that. I mean, I'm managing 105 properties or 110 coming up for, and just the amount of admin and work that's involved in that is phenomenal. So times that by 10, well, that's going to be a big operation.
Big time. So without further ado, let's cut to the interview with Paul Kingham. Hi, and welcome to the Scottish Property Podcast. Paul Kingham, good to have you on, Paul.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for inviting me along. Thanks, Nick.
So tell the listeners, Paul, how you got started in property, and give us the boring bit of the intro bit that people need to hear and want to hear. How you got started in property? What was your kind of desires and aspirations to get involved in property?
Okay, how long have we got?
You've got an hour, mate. Crack
an
on.
hour. Well, I basically got into property. I bought my first property back in 1995, which was like most people buying one to live in. But when I bought it with the idea that it was going to be a doer-upper. So basically, I bought it with the thought that I'll do it up, I'll redecorate it, put a new bathroom in, put a new roof on it as well, actually, and then sold it a few years later. So that was the start of me in property when I was 25.
Did you make money off that?
Not much, to be fair, but that's because I was kind of forced into selling it due to personal circumstances. And that's always a challenge. I mean, I say that to a lot of people, that you only lose money in property when you have to sell it, don't you?
Yeah. And where was this? What area?
You're forced to sell it. I was in Kirkcaldy. That was a 2-bed maisonette.
Oh, my hometown.
Absolutely. Well, I went to school in Kirkcaldy, as you know. So I've always wanted to be in property, but professionally, I would say, Marianne, my wife, and I set up our Kingsmith property in 2017. And there was a few things that kind of spurred us along to do that. I'd spent a year before that on secondment with the Scottish Housing Regulator. That's the organisation that regulates all the housing associations in Scotland. And during that, I had quite a few conversations in the office about the private rental sector and the good, the bad and the ugly of it. But also it kind of spurred me on to think about, investing in property as a business, because prior to that, Marianne and myself had been thinking about setting up our own business consultancy. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the things. And then I had an introduction to a property training seminar. I know that Nick loves these sort of things. And Mary and I went along just because it was a Saturday morning, and I knew it would be interesting, but also knew there'd be an upsell in it because I'd been to these sort of courses or these sort of seminars before, more to do with stock market trading. So I went along to that. We went along and we listened to what they had to say. We thought, actually, this makes a lot of sense. So we could do that as a as a springboard into business from our day jobs effectively. And that's basically how we got started professionally, I'd say, in terms of what we're doing now. So that was probably about 2016, 2017. My motivation though, I mean, there's lots of reasons to get into property. I mean, like most people, to get an early retirement, I'm 50. So I was sitting there, and when I started in 2017, I was 47. I thought, if I stay in the NHS, I've got another 20 years to work. And I don't want to be doing what I'm doing for the next 20 years. I want to do something different. So there was a motivation to get out of a corporate job. But also, when working at the regulator, you hear so many stories about the private rental sector. And there's a small amount in the private rental sector that give it a bad name, but they give it a tremendously bad name. And that was one of the things that I thought, well, do something about it by getting involved and actually, doing something in the private rental sector to help it and raise standards. So that was another motivator. But, everybody's, I think, in property for a reason. And it's usually to make money, but that money might be for some other reason.
What was your role with the Housing Association, Paul?
I was head of planning and performance. So basically I was running the communications team, the monthly budgeting process, the sort of forward planning process as well. I did that for a year on secondment, and then I went into head of planning performance in the NHS role as well. So there's lots of things I've done other than, I'm a qualified accountant to trade, but I've done lots of other things other than accountancy, like project management, and systems improvement, and stuff like that. So it's all boring but interesting.
Do you think being a chartered accountant gives you a good background in property? Because I've always found that the investors that I know that are ex-accountants, they're fucking really, really good as investors.
Well, it gives us an understanding of how the numbers work. Just doing things like working out gross yield on an investment. I've known how to do that since I was in my 20s. So there was a lot of people going these training courses and they're trying to get their head around return on investment and yield and all these sort of numbers and that. And investment's a numbers game. You've got to know lots of other things other than just the numbers, like demand, supply for the product that you're renting or selling. But ultimately, it all boils down to whether you're going to make a profit.
You talked about a thing there that's quite interesting, Paul, about the perception of the private rented sector. And like you, I'm quite passionate about that and sort of changing the public perception of that, because, most people that you speak to will just think, landlords are just kind of money grabbing, don't care about their tenants. If there's stuff needing done, they won't bother their asses, sort of thing. But, me and you know differently, and there's a lot of good landlords out there as well. Where do you think that it is that certain people go wrong when they do get into buy-to-let? Where do you see people falling down?
Falling down in terms of getting a bad reputation? In
terms of getting a bad reputation, in terms of, adding to that fuel to the fire sort of thing for the reputation.
You have so many different people that get involved in property, and a large chunk of landlords are accidental landlords. They'll move out of their home because they move in with their partner, or they've inherited the house and they're renting it out, and they don't want to spend any money on it because they don't really want to be doing it in the first place. They've accidentally become a landlord. So, and that's where it starts to go wrong. If they're reluctant to spend money on repairs, then that causes a problem. You get some landlords who are just downright,
scumbags.
Well, they just don't want to spend anything on their tenants. And I remember going into a flat once. It was a landlord that was doing a viewing on one flat, and he said, "Oh, I've got a flat next door as well." I thought, "Oh, okay, let's have a look at this." We went in, and they had a tenant in this flat, and the ceiling in the living room had all just collapsed in. It was just lying on the floor, and I just thought, oh God, somebody's actually renting this flat out, and it's a total state. People will live in that, which is really quite sad in itself, that people are that desperate for a home that they're willing to put up with that. But also the fact that, the guy's obviously charging the person the rent. It might be a nominal rent, but surely there's enough rent to replace a bit of lick of paint and tidy it up a bit. Because ultimately, if he's got that property for 20 years, you're going to make money on property if you hold it long enough. So I think where people go wrong is they have a short-term view, they're reliant on the rent, and therefore they're not willing to spend any money on the repairs. And that's the thing that you've really got to put a provision aside for routine maintenance.
I think Stephen said that before quite a few times when he's doing his numbers. I think you talk about a 10%. I totally buy into that now as well. It's something I never really put in my spreadsheet. 10% repairs and maintenance contingency fund.
Aye. Get a maintenance pot built up as well, because when shit does go wrong, rather than being tight on it, you've got the money sitting there to go and repair it and keep a really good standard of property. Yeah, I think it's important. Yeah. Do you think that that's changing, the perception that's changing now, because a lot of landlords and investors are now buying unlimited companies? It's very much regulated in the last, well, probably since you've kind of come into it. Actually, can you see that a positive impact?
Well, I think the government have obviously tried to professionalise the industry by creating that legislation where forcing people to do it through limited companies. I mean, that obviously forces people to pay tax as well, because there's been so many landlords that have been operating under the radar. Unfortunately, I don't think the press and the media portray landlords as particularly altruistic in their attitude. You know, they basically, you know, there was a thing on the telly just the other day about the fact that that's the end of the sort of the eviction moratorium finishing, and the first thing is they're saying, oh, millions of people are going to be made homeless. And you think, well, you know, there's probably a lot of landlords that have had to subsidise their tenants for the last while. But the media portray landlords as being minted, their own property. They're obviously, you know, capitalist, you know, money grabbers that are extorting the poor, which isn't the case. We provide a service. There will be some landlords that don't provide a very good service, and there will be other landlords that provide a really, really good service. They provide refurbished properties to a high standard at a reasonable market rent.
I think they're getting pushed out of the market, to be fair. I think it's getting improved.
I think it is, but I think the press haven't caught up, if that makes sense. The press are still portraying it as a bad thing, but I think the actual reality is totally different to what the media portray.
I think the press thing's a good point, right? But I think that's also it's also kind of fueled by the politicians as well, because when it comes to voting time and all the rest of it, and they're putting out their manifestos and all that, no party or politician is ever going to really win votes for saying that they're going to stick up for landlords and all that. Do you know what I mean? So they tend to go the other way, and it's all about the tenants and how they can, you know, provide better support for the tenant, how they can provide housing, which is right. I think that's totally right.
You could be on this topic for a long time and talk about the various things. I mean, the bottom line is we don't provide enough social housing in this country. If we did provide enough social housing at lower rents, then there wouldn't be as big an issue. But because we don't do that, and people are generally not forced, but have they tend to go into the private rental sector because they have to, then that's obviously portrayed as, these guys are exploiting people's misfortune. You know?
It's interesting when you get the feedback on the Facebook posts, especially when you put a flat up in for example, I put one up in like Govan or something like that. Govan's doing really well at the moment. It's very attractive for professionals now as well. And, you know, you put a flat up, one bedroom, I think it was like $550 a month or something, you know. And the minute you put it up on your Facebook, you get pelted from all these people who are like, $550 a month, you must be having a laugh and all that, you know, you money grabbing bastard and all the rest of it, you know. But again, that goes back to your point about, you know, we're not aiming at trying to rip people off. There's obviously a demand for it at that price from people who can afford to pay it. We're not exploiting people who are on benefits and all the rest of it. That's not really the market for that type of property. Do you know what I mean? It's not our fault the government can't get their arse in here.
The bottom line is the market dictates what your rent is. It's not as if a landlord's going to suddenly just charge £600 because they feel like it. They'll not rent out their property if all the other ones in the street are getting rented out at £500. So it's the market that dictates what rents are charged, not landlords.
Yeah.
And as much as we'd love to pass costs on to our customers, like any business would, it's very difficult when you're competing against other landlords that are, you know, dropping their price by £25, and therefore somebody will go to that flat rather than yours. But the public don't see it like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I suppose that's the one thing I do. I feel sort of empathy for the people on lower incomes that are trying to find a house. Because if you balance up the numbers, there's like 40,000, I think, people apply for homelessness status in the country every year, and there's about 40,000 empty homes in the country. So I mean, there's a solution there waiting to happen, but people need to invest in the properties to convert them into livable accommodation.
Did you see the story recently about Willie Hockey in Glasgow building the? I can't remember the exact figure, but it was like 11. What was it? 11,000, I think. 11,000 homes, affordable homes. He was talking about building. He's basically selling a part share in his company to fund this partly, and then he's going to get joint venture funding. Did you see that story at all?
I did see that story. I didn't read all the details, but I thought, yeah, that's good, because ultimately that's the only thing that's ever going to solve the imbalance of supply and demand, is building more affordable homes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I saw it as well, but I mean, some of the figures that were quoted from him as well, I didn't exactly think it was like an amazing kind of charitable kind of gesture, because I mean, the rents they were talking about was like, you know, £700 a month for a 2-bedroom in the Gobbles. So it's not as if it's like, you know, I mean, I would say that's pretty much market rent. Do you know what I mean? So. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that was just kind of he didn't have his research done properly for him. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously still an incentive, financial incentive behind it as well. Anyway,
you've got to make a surplus, whether you call it a profit or a surplus, depending on your status. If you don't make money, then you're not got a viable business or a viable charity for that matter. Yeah. If it doesn't make money, and that's the thing that some people don't understand, that, you know, it has to be sustainable. Normally it can be sustainable as if it makes money.
No, absolutely. Can we rewind it back a little bit and touch on something that I know Nick loves touching on? And you mentioned you went on property training. I always really find it fascinating when people go on something like this and the kind of light bulb moment or the penny dropping moment where they see something, or the guy on stage gives them some kind of golden nugget that think, wow, I could do that. Do you remember what it was, and then where did you go from there?
I think there was a few things in terms of the Burr strategy, in terms of actually, you know, the simple. It's very simple when it's explained, but until it's explained, it's like it is a bit of a light bulb moment. You think, all right, okay, if I do up enough, then I'll be able to refinance it and pull all my money out and recycle that. I mean, I've read a bit about that from I don't know if anyone, Rob Dix's book, Investing, I think it's Property Investment for Beginners. I've read that a few years ago, and he talks about the various different strategies. But when the person on the stage was like saying, you can buy this property and you can borrow the money from somebody else and you can do it up, you can pay them back, and then basically you've got an asset for life. And of course, all the training companies present that in a utopic sort of, all the deals that you're going to do are going to be money in, money out. You're never going to have to spend a single penny of your own money, and you're going to end up with 50 properties over your lifetime, which, you know, in realistic terms is not going to happen unless you're incredibly lucky with your deals. But the general principles actually sat really well in terms of that, and the people that were presenting it, I thought, were credible. I think that makes a big difference, because you hear some of the trainers and you wonder whether they're credible. But the people, I think Caroline Claydon, was on the property podcast before. She was one of the trainers that did the 3-day course, because after the free seminar that Marianne and I went on, we decided to do a 3-day training course after that, and then we went on to do further training after that. But I think Caroline was quite pivotal as well, because she's a very credible and authentic person. So that made a big difference. You know, if I thought somebody was talking bullshit, then I would probably have just thought, nah, this is just another upsell sort of thing.
Nick's held his tongue that whole time.
He has. I'm quite impressed.
I have changed. I've changed my view on property training now, because I've just realised how much money Stephen's making from it. So I'm actually reconsidering it myself, whether I should get into it now. So no, but there's a reason why he's been able to afford a Tesla in the last couple of months, by the way. No,
yeah, it's hard work. Ultimately, you can't train someone and you can't do a training course unless you know what you're talking about. And you've either done that by doing it yourself or learning about it. So,
yeah, it was interesting. One of the posts recently on the Scottish Property Podcast Facebook group, which got huge amounts of engagement, was this very topic. So it's probably good just to talk about it for a wee while. But it was interesting, some of the responses. And there was one guy that said, I can't believe how many people are commenting on this who have not actually been and done a course, right? So, you know, I can hold my hand up and say I've never actually done a course, so I probably should shut my mouth. But the issue I have, and I go back to the same points, is this whole kind of upsell, you know, vulnerable people who are at a point in their life where they're like, nothing's working for me. I hate my job. I hate my life. They see this flashiness on Instagram, the ad sucks them in, and before you know it, they're taking out the course on the credit card, they're getting paying for it on their student loan and all the rest of it. Should there be regulation around this, Paul? Should there be some sort of
yes?
Yeah.
That's the quick answer to that one. Is yes, there should be regulation.
How do you think that could be implemented? People sign up and get registered, and obviously sign up to some sort of like.
Well, you could do it in the same way as you would do any sort of qualification. You get a registered body to accredit it, and therefore, you know, you do a formal qualification. At the end of it, you get some sort of exam or test or, you know, qualification at the end of it, and that would regulate it to a certain degree. There's lots of factors in that, though. You were talking about costs. I tend to talk to people about the value they're going to get from it. I mean, if you look at the cost, how much do you spend on your Netflix and your, I don't know if you've got Sky or
is this going to be the advertising line for just the cost of a couple of Starbucks coffees per month? You could be part of my 12-month mentoring.
No, I mean, the point is that most people spend, what, 50, 60 pounds on their Sky box and maybe another 50 quid on their Netflix. So maybe paying 80 quid a month on their TV. So I've got my calculator to hand, like all good accountants. £80 a month times 12 times 15 years is £14,500, right? So if you take it that if you spend £14,500 over 15 years, you're getting value from your Netflix and your Skybox, because that's how you enjoy spending your time. Whereas if you took that 15,000 and spent it in a 1 hour on training that gave you the skills to get out your job 20 years earlier, then is that as much value? Some people would say yes, some people would say no.
And we've had people on that have definitely, talked about it like it has been the best money they've ever spent as well. So absolutely. we like to give it the two sides.
I think the thing is, though, nowadays, as an accountant, I was talking to one of my colleagues from university. When accountants 20 years ago got paid a lot of money because of what they knew, right? Nowadays, you can find out everything on the internet, so information is free. You don't need to be an accountant to find out how you can claim furlough, for example, or any of these things that have happened in the last 12 months. You just go into Google or you go into HMRC and you read about it, you can find out yourself. So accountants get paid now for the know-how of how to implement things.
Yeah.
And the same applies to property mentors or coaches or things like that. You can find all the information by reading books and going on YouTube videos and on the internet and find all the information. But how you implement that and how you hold yourself accountable to implementing that is the difference. And I think that is one of the things that the training provides, plus the network that you're exposed to. Because, I mean, the number of people that have come on your program, your podcast, that I know from training with them has been quite interesting in terms of what they do after it. Because they're bought in. It's like, you've got skin in the deal if you spent a huge sum of money on your training.
And you need to make it work. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the training's like the glue. You can get all the little pieces of information from podcasts and online, read up on it, listen to audiobooks. You can get all there, but the training's like the glue that just puts it all together.
There are very few graduates of the University of Google.
Yeah. And do you know what? I find it funny as well. Like the people that do bash them on our course as well, like on the group the other day, it's the people that haven't done it. It's the people that haven't been in it, haven't experienced it, and have just got a negative opinion on it because they've learned the hard way. They've done the years of hard knocks, and they're like, why the fuck would you pay tens of thousands of pounds for training? I learned it in 15 years. Well, if somebody could teach you and fast track you and show you in 18 months or 2 years, I would pay that. I'd fucking pay that all day long to do it rather than...
Well, I think the old adage is you're going to pay for your education one way or another. You either pay it up front or you pay for it through the mistakes that you make.
Yeah.
I like the model like I think you guys are both doing, which is the kind of coach and mentorship where you're kind of getting the continuous support, you've got the accountability, that sort of thing. I really think that is kind of worthwhile for people. And if they can find somebody that they want to aspire to kind of be doing things like they're doing, then I think that's really valuable. So yeah, I'm not totally against it all. Do you know what I mean?
You did mention something on that I do find challenging, and that's the marketing that some of these training companies use. I mean, you mentioned sort of before, what people are paying for it on their credit cards and that, and I've seen that work in operations on some of these training companies, and that's where I think the ethics start to kick in for me. That I just find that hard to go along with, where people are they're not duped. I mean, they're very convincing sales pitches. I mean, I remember saying to Marianne, right, we're going to walk into this room and there's going to be motivational music playing. It's going to get your mood up. And there's going to be lots of talk about lifestyle and what you can achieve. And it's all neuro-linguistic programming in practice to get people actually thinking, oh, wonderful. So, and unless you're aware of that really highly skilled sales process, it can suck people in, I suppose. And that's the bit that I find quite challenging. So that's why I'm not involved with any of the training companies now. But
it'll be interesting to see how some of these training companies, these big ones that have got their kind of formula. I'm talking about ones like, I don't know what
I wouldn't name any. Let's go down.
I don't care. I mean, like, the ones that I'm like aware of is like Progressive, and these ones that have got like, they're massive operations, right? But it'll be interesting to see how they kind of adapt, because like you say, it's like there's so much information out there now that, that model of teaching somebody the practical stuff, about how to actually do it. It's one of the things that we've kind of shied away from in the podcast. Like, how many times do you actually need a video or a podcast explaining what is the BRRR strategy? Do you know what I mean? Like, was there any point in actually doing that? So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of adapt and change. I think that's how the model that you guys are doing with that kind of coaching support thing is much more.
I think that's one of the good things that's come out of COVID, is that the model's changed. I think it's changed for the time being, whether it goes back to the way it was before. Because I certainly know when I did my training that we went to symposiums down in Birmingham with like 300 or 400 other delegates all learning different subjects on these symposiums, and they were big events, and you got a buzz from being at those sort of things, and it was very motivational. So they may go back to doing that, but whether or not people are willing to pay as much money for it, knowing that the knowledge is there for free, and what they really are going to benefit from is working one-to-one or as a group with a mastermind sort of group or a one-to-one coach, is where the real benefit comes from, because that's the implementation. That's the bit that you can't get from for free, is implementing the strategies.
Absolutely, mate. Let's move on away from property training. We covered that enough there, and let's talk about kind of after you've done your training. You've got some big goals in your business? Can you share them with the listeners and kind of where you're at in achieving those big goals?
Right. Well, our goal, it's more of a slogan than a goal. I'll try and explain this. Is that when we started in property, we initially thought, let's build up a portfolio of maybe 50 properties, and that'll be a really adequate pension scheme for the two of us. But me being me and Marianne being Marianne, we thought that's not big enough. And we thought, look, we want to impact as many people as we can through our business over a long period of time. So we came up with a slogan of 1,000 homes for 1,000 families by 2030. So we thought, we'll give ourselves a decade and we'll work on this 1,000 homes target. And what I described that as a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And that goal, if you think, Bob Proctor says that, a goal should be scary enough it should be big enough to scare you, and actually sort of like paraphrasing it, you might not understand how you're going to do it, and that's the whole point of a BHAG. As it turns out, I would say it's more of a call to action now. It's more of a try to encourage other people to sort of like join in this whole property investment journey over the next decade to try and make as many homes for people as possible. Because in fairness, I don't really want to own 1,000 buy-to-lets. That would be like owning a housing association. Unless you had it completely systemized, it would take up a lot of your time and probably be more.
Sounds horrible, eh?
That and it's not the most efficient way to make money as well. I mean, there are more profitable ways to make money in property through, commercial property and various other strategies like development and stuff like that. So
where does the hairy part come into it, by the way?
It's just a phrase. I can't remember who coined that phrase, a big, hairy, audacious goal, a BHAG.
I was going to say, was that what Mary Ann's goal was when she met you? Was that what she was referring to you as?
Her BHAG, probably something like that. I don't know.
And where are you at with that at the moment? Because you've done really well on the
first. Since we started, I mean, we took a wee bit of time to get started because it started in 2017, so we didn't really get going until 2018 at the start of that. And we sourced 90 properties in that since then. Obviously, we bought some of them ourselves and kept them, but the majority of those have been working with other investors to help them on their journey. So that's where we are at the moment. Still got
there must be a reason why you've kind of changed your I mean, you've sourced 90 properties. Some people say like, well, that sounds like a great business. So why not continue doing that and source another, 200-300? What's the...
Well, I probably will over the next decade. I'm not going to stop sourcing properties. We're still a fully compliant sourcing business. My strategy has changed more to buying our own because I've looked at what other people are doing, and you learn from other people and you think, well, actually, if they're doing that, that might work. So scaling up to actually having a larger portfolio ourselves is my primary goal now, along with helping other people through coaching more than actually sourcing. I'd rather teach people how to do it themselves than have to go out and do it for them, because it comes with a lot of headaches. As any sourcers know, that when you're sourcing for other people, it can be a bit challenging at times.
That kind of resonates with me a wee bit, because like I've been spending quite a bit of time sourcing for my landlords and investors, right? But because I've been spending so much time into that, I've kind of dropped the ball with my own investing, and I've got cash sitting there that I haven't done anything for. And as we know just now, with inflation and all the rest of it, the cash is just now eroding away in the bank. So I've done all this work for £1,000 sourcing a deal for my investor landlords, and they've built up their portfolios, but I've not really progressed. So
I think that your model is a good one, because you're managing it at the back end as well. So if you're sourcing properties for your landlords, then effectively you're
building the business,
bringing yourself business by helping your clients.
So there is a reason. It's, for me, it wasn't really about the short term, just be quick fixes of the source and feel like you say it was a long term of retaining the properties. Yeah.
So hopefully we can have another chat in 2030, and I'll tell you how well we've got over that 1,000 homes.
Cool.
Right. And so the ones that you've kept for yourself, can you give us a case study or talk us through the typical stuff you like to keep for yourself?
Well, yeah, we own properties in Dumbartonshire, Glasgow, Lanarkshire at the moment, although I'm selling those ones, and Fife. A lot of our stock are 2-bedroom cottage flats, but I've got the Sam Dyer 3-bedroom ex-council house type property as well. A couple of tenement flats as well. They come with a whole set of different challenges with the age of the building, tenement flats. So usually they are stock that would be around about the sort of close to 40,000 mark as possible, that we can renovate and hopefully bring up to the value of around about the 65,000-70,000 mark, and safely get a mortgage on it. And that's kind of what I would tell a lot of beginners to say. Look, make sure that if you can buy a property that you're safely going to get mortgaged, don't look for the really low end stuff that's going to stay at the low end regardless of what you do in your refurb. You might be stuck on a very high percentage mortgage for quite a while. So we kind of look for things that we can get up to that sort of 70,000 mark and safely get onto a buy-to-let mortgage. And that's the kind of bread and butter stuff that a lot of buy-to-let investors go for. I think I'm probably going to move more into the 3-bedroom house stock though.
Can you give us a case study, something you've done in Glasgow? Because I know Nick loves hearing about case studies in his own.
We have a 3-bedroom house in Baillieston. That was one where it didn't fit the BRRRR method. Well, it will do eventually, but it didn't to start off with. And that maybe is an example of my attitude, is that we were brought that property as a source property to flip on. It was around about the 80,000 mark that it was valued at. The sourcer had said if you spend 20 grand in it, it'll be worth 130 or something like that. I mean, those numbers kind of work in my head, sort of thing. But then we went and spoke to the tenant, and the tenant was having a right hard time because they'd been kicked out of their property a few times. So we looked at it as a buy to let and ended up just keeping it. So it was basically what I would describe as a tenanted vanilla buy to let, where basically we just put the deposit down, bought it with a mortgage. It valued at 90. When we bought it, it's still valued at 90, but we've managed to pull some of the money back out.
Did you refurb it at all?
I've not had to spend any money on it at the moment. We're planning on doing it gradually, but obviously it depends on what the tenant's happy with. And that's what I would say is, I used it as a case study of how you can get into property for less than 30,000, because we bought that and the deposit and all the fees were about 25,000. And that's cash flow from day one. That's, you know, from the very day that we bought it, it's been cash flow because I had a tenant in it. Other ones that we bought one in Leven, well, it's actually in Buckhaven, and it's the exact opposite of that, where we bought it. I think when we bought it, it was valued at 60,000. We managed to get it for 39. And then we didn't do anything with it because of lockdown. It was sitting there pretty empty and vacant, and we were actually going to sell it. But then we went to get it revalued, and it valued at 70. So we put it on a mortgage, pulled all our money out from what we spent on buying it, and now we're getting it tenanted. And again, we haven't had to spend, well, we spent about maybe £2,000 on getting the electrics upgraded and getting it decorated. So it's not been a burr, it's been the opposite of a burr. Rent it out, sort of not even do anything with it and get your money back out. It's just luck more than anything. Well, it wasn't luck, it was good purchasing. Mary Ann would never say it was luck. It's all down to the fact that she bought it really well.
Yeah.
There's some good examples of some great, you know, deals there and some great numbers, but obviously let's not kid on. People are struggling. Actually, let me rephrase that. Depending on where you are in the country, people are struggling to get deals at the moment. So, you know, when has been your kind of last buy, renovate, refinance deal? Are you still picking them up in this current market?
Not very often, to be fair. Our last one that we bought was I haven't bought anything this year. We're going through, like, we're selling a couple of our stock out, our flats in Lanarkshire, and when we've got the cash out of those, then we might start buying again. But it is very difficult to get burr deals at the moment. I'm actually down in Manchester at the moment.
Don't tell yourself that story. That's just a story you're telling yourselves.
Well, no, it's not impossible. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's challenging. It's difficult.
How much will I wind up, Nick?
Logically, why would somebody sell at a discount in this market?
This is what you guys have got to tell your students, because this is what you're teaching them. So you need to say, guys, it's possible. You can get deals, you know.
See, I don't teach my students anything that isn't realistic.
I only teach them what I'm doing. There's 7 refinances going through at the moment with properties I've picked up in the last few months that are all bars. So I know.
And that's in Aberdeen, isn't it? Are they all in Aberdeen?
No, Ayrshire. They're all over the place. Brecon, Aberdeen, Ayrshire. They're difficult. The market is tough. But I've had to go as far as Ayrshire to pick up some stuff when I needed some stuff, which is, you know, a couple of hours away from me, and it's areas I don't know well at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. You have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to research a new area and get to know it pretty well, so that you can see what opportunities are there. I was just going to say that I'm down in Manchester at the moment because I'm actually looking at the English market now to see what opportunities are down here in terms of buy-to-lets or HMOs, and that's quite interesting because it's streets and streets of terrace houses that look identical to each other.
Do you think that'll be a strategy for you in the coming future? I know a lot of investors in Scotland, kind of after they've got a certain portfolio, they just diversify down into northeast England and pick up HMO properties that cash flow a hell of a lot better than our kind of vanilla buy-to-lets.
Certainly, I'm certainly looking at it. I haven't quite decided whether I'm going to do it because you hear a lot of different stories from people who have invested in HMOs, and once again, it always comes down to the numbers. If you can make a higher return on investment through doing an HMO, then it makes it worthwhile. But there's going to be a lot more, potentially a lot more hassle from a HMO because the tenants are more transient and there's more turnover of tenants generally. I'm talking generally. There might be some HMOs that have got tenants in them for a long time. So I've not quite decided yet, but I like to find out before I make a decision.
No, that's good. So you're not getting distracted with a shiny penny object and going down to England to go and do HMOs. You've still got your your clear strategy that you're focused on.
Buy-to-lets is always going to be my primary strategy, because that's why I got into it. That's the whole 1,000 homes for 1,000 families, buy-to-lets, probably more based in Scotland than anyway, because that's where my home is, obviously. But diversification is always a good thing in terms of any investment.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, do you still invest in the stocks and shares?
I do, but not as much as I'd like to, because I never seem to have enough time to actually sit and research the companies. I used to actually be involved in share clubs, where basically you'd get maybe 10 of your friends together, you'd all put in 50 quid a month, and then after 6 months you'd have enough money in the pot to be able to buy shares. And I did that a few times with in a couple of places I worked, which was really good, because you're not actually having to risk a huge amount of money in any one investment. And the whole point is education again, of learning all about how different businesses work, what makes their share value go up, and how to invest in stocks and shares. So, but I haven't done that for a while. So my portfolio of shares is pretty small at the moment. It's all in property.
Yeah, I've done the same. I diversified into index funds. I didn't want to spend too much time looking at them and researching companies. Just took the easy option of compound interest and just investing in the index funds. But I think you raised a good point about diversification, and we spoke about it with Dee Ludd on the podcast a few weeks back. And I think it's so important to not be so. We're all probably quite guilty of that when we're involved in property, that we think property is the be all and end all, but I think it's quite clever to diversify your investments.
I think it's, the way I look at it is, property is my business. And okay, because a lot of people talk about property investment and investing in property, and to me investment is very passive. It's like you buy 1,000 shares in Royal Bank of Scotland and hope that they go up in value and pay a dividend every year. That's investment. And if you've done your research on that particular business or company, you buy their shares and you should be able to sit back and know that your research will pay back by the fact that the share value will go up. Property isn't like that. Property is very much a hands-on business. If you because you've got your tenants, if you're buy-to-lets, they're your customers. You've got your purchasers if you're flipping property. So you've got customers, you've got suppliers, you've got the whole thing that a business requires. You need to do marketing, whether it's to find properties or find investment funds. You need to know how to market, and you need to know how to systemize it, otherwise you get bogged down in the time. So property is without doubt a business rather than just passively, unless you're an angel investor, unless you're just getting a 10% from lending money. And
that's the goal, isn't it?
I can't believe Nick can't get in to talk. He's put his hand up. I'll be a first.
So on that debate then, so like, is property passive investment? Like, I hear a lot of people talking about the kind of, is it or isn't it? Like, I was listening, you were talking about Sam Dyer earlier on. Hate to give him the airtime, by the way. He'll just be loving this.
Oh, he'll appreciate it.
We're talking about, but he was talking about on Clubhouse recently, that, like, there's no way property is passive, there's so much that you have to do. But I've got clients that are based in, abroad, and they've never seen the property. They've never had to do anything with choosing tenants. They've never had to do anything with the refurbs. I've taken care of everything for them. All they're getting is the money coming in, anything that's left over from the rent. They only have to make the occasional decision, whether they want to spend money on it. I mean, that's pretty passive, is it not?
No, without a doubt, it is. I would say it's semi-passive in terms of they are not having to do much other than make the occasional decision and probably approve a repair or two every so often, and maybe make a final say in a tenant. That's about as passive as you can get in property and buy-to-lets. If you're doing them yourself and you're having to go through the renovation process and having to actually find properties, then that's money, that's time spent up front for passive income at the back end.
Yeah, for sure.
Your client that you mentioned, Nick, how many properties has he got with you?
I've got one that's got 2. I've got one that's got 3. Pretty small number.
Aye. So the my response to that is something that I'm going through at the moment, and I'm a complete advocate of putting property straight to a good management agent. But what I'm finding now is that, well, as you might know, I'm looking for an employee to come on board, because I've found that as much as I try and treat property at the back end as passive as I can, it's fucking not passive when you get enough of them as well, because it's okay. You answer the phone and you answer an email to a letting agent, but multiply that by, it's okay if it's a handful, multiply that by a larger amount, it's flipping becomes a pain in the arse. Even just taking making decisions and seeing the statements come through and answering the questions, that becomes a job in itself. And so you think it could be passive, but when the portfolio grows, you go, oh no, this is not passive at all.
And that's the downside of the 1,000 homes for 1,000 families
it's true.
goal, that you would end up having to have a whole accounts department to check the rents were coming in every month, and the mortgages were all getting paid, and the repairs were getting authorised properly. So you would be employing staff. So you literally would be running a business, because you've got to manage those staff to manage the letting agents. So as your portfolio gets bigger, and I think, it goes back to your accidental landlords. They don't feel like they're running a business because they've inherited a property somehow, and they're not really want to spend any money on it. Whereas the whole buy-to-let industry has been systemized, turned into limited companies, and encouraged to grow, I suppose, in some ways, and systemize it. And that's what it's all about. But that's not once you know how to systemize things, it's dead easy, and you can systemize it quite a lot, so you don't have to spend a lot of time managing things.
It's good points, guys.
No, it's good. No, we had a chat about that last week, Paul, didn't we? Playing cash flow about it, and it's you kind of think property is investment, but it definitely is a property business now when you grow. And
in fairness, I can't think of anything that is 100% passive, because
except for investing in stocks and shares and getting a dividend, yeah.
But even then, it's not passive, because you've got to make the decision as to what shares to buy, and that takes time to research them. And people think, well, pension's passive. Well, not really, because you've had to work for 40 years to get your pension, basically. So it's work up front for less work at the back end. It's the same with buy-to-lets. If you systemize your profile, your portfolio, then you'll have less effort further on. So it's time invested up front. So that's how. But you don't get anything for nothing.
I remember doing that exercise a few years back, and it was working out your hourly rate on adding a property to your buy-to-let portfolio. And the time you add the sourcing time, the acquisition time, going through the conveyance and the refurb, getting the compliant, getting it to a letting agent, you look at it and it was like, fucking 10, 12p an hour. I can't remember the exact, but
exactly.
It was
and you've got to add in all the deals that you don't get as well.
Well, that was it.
You might put in 40 offers to get one offer.
It took you 3 months just to get that one property. You had to try and factor that in, and it worked out that your hourly rate was like pennies. And people, and you can kind of see people's opinion. People don't see that picture. They think that it's easy and you can make a lot of money from it. But like you say, if you can systemize it at the back end, year one might be 10p an hour, but year 2, 3, and 4, and 5 might be £300 an hour, because all you did is take your statement from your letting agent, look at it, check it, make sure the mortgage is paid, and done an hour a month on that property.
And there's a learning curve as well. Your first buy-to-let, your first refurb, you're learning all about the processes of what goes in what order in terms of the refurbishment. But once you've done that a few times and you're applying, you'll probably use the phrase in your training, a cookie cutter approach, where you're basically putting in the same sort of things in each of your buy-to-lets or your flips. You know the spec that you're using, and therefore it becomes quicker and more efficient. And the builder knows what to expect as well, so that they're more efficient. And it's just gradually, like any business, making it more efficient as it goes along, and hopefully growing it so it becomes more profitable. And then selling it all and lending the money to Nick at 10% per annum so that he can build his stuff up. And then
I was going to say, cookie cutter goes in the property investors dictionary along with the power team. That's
no. Power team is one that I always thought was a bit weird when I first heard that phrase, was a power team. I know that sounds so cheesy.
We had another post on the podcast group, the kind of most kind of hated terms in property, and that was like one of them, and there was some really good ones in there as well. But yeah,
I think boom and cha-ching are two of my most hated phrases in property because they're used so much on and I find myself saying boom at times as well, and I just think,
we keep coming out with them like at the start of the podcast and that, when we were doing the educational ones, we kept coming out with power team. That was one we did use quite a lot.
I've never heard that phrase before until I went on a property course, a power team. I thought, what is it? And it's just your team, basically.
Yeah. Nah, it's all good. That was a good chat.
No, brilliant, mate. Thanks very much for joining us, Paul.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, I think we'll just wrap up there. I think we're taking up enough of your time. Could you let the listeners know where to reach out to you and how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, probably best to just connect with me on LinkedIn and take it from there. Drop me a message on LinkedIn and I'll connect and we can have a virtual coffee.
Well, tell people a little bit, about, obviously you've got the great branding there behind you as well, Paul Kingham Coaching. So like, what exactly is it that you are doing in that space? And
right, well, in that space, I'm a business coach in terms of the fact that I'm a chartered accountant. Means that I coach people who are running general businesses and helping them out, but also a bit of property mentorship as well. If people are looking to start getting into property, they haven't really got an idea of what to do, then we can work together, build a strategy up, get them an accountability program basically, so that they can get to their goal as quickly as possible. And that's kind of what I do. I'm kind of downplaying it a wee bit, I suppose, but yeah, it's good fun. That's what I enjoy. I enjoy helping people. That's why I got into this business, was to help people, whether it be tenants or whether it be other investors.
Or 1,000 homes for 1,000 families.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Well, and I go back to that. There's 40,000 empty homes in Scotland, so having a goal of 1,000 properties isn't really that big when you put it into context. But it is obviously a big goal.
No, when I heard you first say it, I thought it was really good in it, and I think you did kind of coin it and mention it. If collectively people had grouped together, that goal could be quite easily 40,000. Could all you need 40 people with the same goal.
You could put an extra zero on that if you collectively got a group of people to say, right, we're going to invest in property, and you did it strategically, like you do with your mastermind group, where you're all learning from each other and you're all building up your strategies. And basically, one guy buys 10 properties, another guy buys 10 properties. Before you know it, or 100 properties.
We've got over 2,000 people in the Scottish Property Podcast Facebook group page. That's only 20 properties each, and we've reached the homeless target for Scotland.
Exactly.
It's not a huge goal when you look at it like that, is it?
Yeah, and it's getting those properties back into circulation. There'll be a lot of people that would support that.
Yeah, so that was a great chat with Paul. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We had a good laugh as well. And Paul's quite a regular on the Scottish Property Podcast Facebook group, and he chips in with good comments every now and then. So if you guys want to head over there, make sure you're a member of the group. If you've got a little bit of spare minute, then please jump on and leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts as well. Stephen?
Yeah, brilliant. To help us reach more people with the podcast. We're really enjoying it. We love chats like this with Paul as well. So long may it continue.
And if there's any more suggestions of guests who we can get on, then we're always happy to listen to that, or topics that you want covered. Thanks again, guys, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks a lot.